Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Sunday, August the 6th, 2023. Today is Hiroshima Day, the 78th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. Now, I have looked at the horoscope for this event before, so I'm not really going to look at it again, but I just want to remind you of how important this chart is for the moment it was dropped and when it exploded. I think about a minute later. That was on August the 6th, 1945. It was dropped at 8:15 a.m. in Hiroshima, over Hiroshima, and it exploded about a minute later. This chart, from an astrological point of view, is incredible. Reason being, because at the moment of the dropping, Uranus was exactly on the midheaven. It was at the top of the chart. So you can see this is the top of the chart. You can see that Uranus is right at the top. This, I think, is this is the chart for the actual explosion, which was sort of a minute after the dropping, I think. But it is a signature. When you've got a planet on the midheaven, that really does tell you about the chart. This Uranus exactly on the midheaven. It perfectly symbolized what happened over Hiroshima. The bomber flying high over the city, dropping the bomb, and it was a uranium bomb. The first atomic bomb exploded in New Mexico was a plutonium bomb. The Nagasaki bomb was plutonium, but the Hiroshima bomb was uranium, and the ruler of uranium is Uranus. So it is so fitting that Uranus was exactly on the midheaven when that bomb was dropped. Now, you might say, okay, maybe the people planning the bombing were into astrology and they just chose that time because they knew Uranus was on the midheaven. Are you sure? Do you really think so? I don't think so. I don't think that's very likely at all. I think this Uranus on the midheaven was not planned to fit the astrology. Instead, this chart is just a simple reminder that astrology works. Now, you might say, well, you just cherry-picked a chart that Uranus really that astrology seems to work for. Well, I don't think it's just cherry-picking. This is one of the most important events in human history. And the signature is perfect. The reason it's important is because a uranium bomb was dropped as an airburst. In other words, it was dropped high above the city. It exploded high above the city. And so, it fits perfectly. So I would urge you to look at this chart if you're not aware of it already. And although it is really a terrible event, from an astrological point of view, it's kind of reassuring. It reminds us that astrology does work. It's a very subtle thing. Astrology, it appears not to work, and then you suddenly see it really, really working in a major way. So the chart of the atomic bomb is really important, and that's something you should really look at. Now, I'm not going to talk about that anymore. I want to talk about pets and the astrology and pets. One commenter has already asked about astrology and pets, so I thought today I would. That's what I'd look at. Yesterday my dog was 1 year old. It's her birthday, so that's kind of fitting. Dogs do have horoscopes. Very often we don't know their time of birth because the litter comes and breeders are not really interested in times, are they? I don't know. But we do have a problem, of course, that you can have 8 dogs in a litter, and those dogs can have very different destinies depending on their owners, and that is a difficult thing to deal with. It may be that each horoscope has dormant features and active features, and that depends on the owner. So you've got one owner takes a dog and wants it as an outdoor dog, looking after the chickens and all that kind of stuff. Well, certain aspects of a horoscope may be brought out in that case. Another dog is kept in an apartment and is completely indoor. Then other aspects of a horoscope may be brought out, or it may be that just people who are into astrology attract dogs that fit their charts. I mean, I suppose that's quite possible. So I'm going to be considering the charts of the only 2 dogs I own, or I owned or did own. I had one dog who died last year, and I'm going to look at her chart, and I'm going to look at the chart of my current dog. And I'm really sorry that it's so personal. I should kind of keep this personal stuff out of these videos, but that's my only experience of dogs. I mean, that's it. I'm not really a dog person, so that's all I've got to talk about in terms of the astrology of dogs, or in astrology of pets in general. But before I do that, I do want to look at today's astrology. Today is Sunday, August the 6th, 2023. So let's see what is going on. Top right, that is my current dog, the dog who's just had her first birthday, looking very bouncy. What's going on today astrologically? Here's the chart. August the 6th, 2023, noon, set for New York. Why not? Moon is still in Aries. At noon, New York, 21:45 Aries, and it is moving to a trine of Venus. So, Moon in Aries, trine Venus in Leo. All things being equal, it should be quite good for relationships. It's about being able to relate to people, not in a totally emotional way, because it's in fire signs. Venus in Leo is not the most emotional placement for Leo, but Venus in Leo is not the most emotional placing for Venus. Leo is a very hot sign. It's a masculine sign. Venus doesn't fully function in Leo, but in terms of excitement, Moon in Leo, Moon in Aries, trine Venus in Leo, it is quite exciting. There's a lot of buzz. So in terms of our social life, there are a lot of sparks, a lot of interesting things going on. So in terms of relationships, now might be a good time to meet people, intensify relationships. If you're single, now might be, you've got a chance to, find someone, or at least start some contact with someone. Yeah, someone exciting, because it is a trine in fire signs. And it's not the only thing going on. Here's the sun at 1357 Leo, and you'll notice that it's beginning to make a square aspect to Jupiter in Taurus. Now, this aspect carries on into Monday, so it's kind of not just a Sunday thing; it's a Sunday-Monday event. So, Sun-Jupiter square is a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, it can be exciting, it can be dynamic, it can be about new opportunities, it can be optimistic, but it can be also something of an exaggeration. Things could get exaggerated, blown out of all proportion. So we do have to be careful there. So on, whether it's, emotions, money, things could get out of control. So we need to be on guard. So, look at our expenditure. Are we spending too much money? Look at what people are talking about. Sun in Leo can be quite arrogant. Square Jupiter. People might be stubbornly arrogant. They feel they have to prove a point. They have to say how wonderful they are, and they have to say it again and again. And in the process, they might look rather stupid. So beware of that. And for our own part, when we feel threatened or we feel undermined, it's very easy to fight back by saying how wonderful we are, or by bringing up some past event which shows our greatness, and just keep we keep going on about it, and again it makes us look stupid. So resist the temptation to exaggerate, resist the temptation to sing your own praises, because I don't think it's going to work. As far as other things going on, Mercury, you can see Mercury is at around 16 Virgo, there is Mars, the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So the Mars-Saturn midpoint is Mercury's at 11 Virgo, and the Mars-Saturn midpoint is at sort of 11 Sagittarius Gemini. So Mercury is square the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So this could manifest in a couple of ways. Remember, Mars-Saturn can be about death, destruction. It can be about being quite harsh. So we might have quite negative thoughts, just these thoughts about death and how bad things are, and we might even get off on it in some way. So yeah, be careful. Don't spiral into negative thoughts. Don't sort of convince yourself that of all the possibilities that could possibly happen, the worst possibility is really going to occur. So resist the temptation to be negative. And in terms of communication, Mercury on a Mars-Saturn midpoint can say things that are just harsh and inappropriate. So if someone annoys you, think very carefully how you're going to respond. Yeah, you might have some brilliant words to cut this person down to size, but it may be best to just shut up, because angry words, bitter words are not going to create the right impression, and they could actually undermine us. And while all this is going on, Uranus, there's the planet Uranus, it is opposition the Mars-Pluto midpoint. So Uranus opposition Mars-Pluto, that is about using Hiroshima, using an atomic bomb to crack a peanut. It's just using too much force, and could potentially be about the exercise of massive force to get our way. So again, be careful. Watch out for other people trying to use massive force to get their way. Will it work? I suppose it could work, but how much damage is going to be caused in the process? So yeah, I think we have to be careful. Also, the Mars-Hades midpoint. Hades, remember, that's a hypothetical planet connected with death, graveyards, garbage. The Mars-Hades midpoint is aspecting the Aries point. So it's kind of similar picture as with Mercury on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Although Aries is about the world at large, it's not such a personal point. But, when we look at the world, we're going to see the unpleasantness of people. We're going to see the evil that men do. And death, destruction. Look at the news. Look at what's going on. It's not good. And I think we might see that with Aries on the Mars, aspecting the Mars Hades midpoint. So let's now move to my forecasts for the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for today, which is Sunday, August the 6th, 2023. Aries. You don't have to do things alone, not with the moon aspecting Venus. If you share your ideas with others, you'll almost certainly get a favourable response. And if you and your partner have had recent disagreements, you have a chance to patch things up. But maybe you and someone else will hit the right note, and it will happen the moment you meet for the first time. Taurus, you are pretty stubborn at the moment because Venus, your ruler, is in a rooted sector of your solar chart, and it's also retrograde. Yet you don't want to be too stuck in your ways. Things happen that you weren't planning on, and you need to respond with imagination and good grace. Gemini, you present a somewhat complicated picture. On one hand, you're friendly and sociable, able to communicate with many different people. But on the other hand, you can't help thinking about the more negative sides of life, death and destruction and misery, in keeping with the 78th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima. Typical Gemini. Cancer, you continue to prioritize your material goals, and you'll be happiest when you're doing things that directly benefit yourself and your family. But that doesn't mean that you have to be selfish. A bit of focused generosity can help cement your contacts with the outside world, and sooner or later, you'll be able to benefit from the situation. Leo, today the Sun is making a 90-degree aspect to Jupiter. Whether it is helpful or not rather depends on the situation. If you're planning on having a fun Sunday, there's a danger that you overdo it. But if you're doing something sensible, especially relating to your career, then there are definite benefits of this aspect. Virgo, if you act behind the scenes, you're unlikely to come to any harm. Indeed, when you're not being noticed, you can start observing the underlying details, and you'll perhaps start to understand the weaknesses of other people and the systems in which they function. Someone has got a big idea, and you know for sure that it's nonsense. Libra, the moon is aspecting Venus, your ruling planet. You're much in demand, and you need to make time to meet certain people. You might not want to, but one way or another, it's probably necessary. And one-to-one relationships can exceed your expectations if you give them the chance. Scorpio, it's a day of hyperbole and exaggeration, thanks to a square aspect between the Sun and Jupiter. There are lots of claims flying around, not just in your social and personal life, but also on the news, and it's important that you don't take things at face value. Further, your own decisions shouldn't be derailed by unsubstantiated nonsense. Sagittarius, you have to decide how much weight you give to the details. Some details really are important and they need to be addressed right now. But other details can be addressed at a later stage. You also don't want to be in a position where your unthinking criticism helps destroy a perfectly good plan. Capricorn, keep going, and I don't think you should make changes just for the sake of it. Your broad strategy is correct, and you don't want to be distracted at the last moment. And there is something quite complicated that needs to be dealt with. The solutions come about through hard work, not just through creativity and genius. Aquarius, there are some people who have a huge footprint, far bigger than they deserve. They have to let the whole world know that they are out and about. You find the situation irritating, but you should probably let things run their course. At the same time, a new line of communication needs to be opened up. Pisces, the last thing you need is negativity, and some people have a miserable view of the world. Such people need to be avoided, especially if they're a Gemini or a Virgo. Also, there could be mindless criticism about things which are unimportant. You have to rise above it all and focus on your real destiny. So let's now move on to the I Ching. So, as always, I threw 3 coins in the air, asking the question, what is Sunday going to be like for visitors to my YouTube channel? So the first hexagram I threw was hexagram number 6, conflict. It seems there's conflict. It seems that there's a bit of a fight going on. I don't know what this is about. You need to look at your environment, look at where you are, look at the people you're dealing with. There seems to be a disagreement. You probably are quite convinced you're right. Or I suppose it might be a conflict involving other people around you, but you're not directly involved in. But we're dealing with a situation where people don't really agree with each other. And the question is, how do you deal with it? Now, the 4th line is moving. And this suggests that, if you are involved in a conflict with another person, you're having an argument and, it's got to be settled one way or another, it's probably the case that actually you're in a stronger position than this other person. You're actually in a position where you could almost sort of bulldoze them into submission. You just keep arguing, keep criticizing, keep bashing, and you'll eventually get your way. But is that really such a good thing? Because the I Ching suggests that you might actually be wrong. Yes, you might be able to get your way, you might be able to win the argument, but do you deserve to get your way? Do you deserve to win the argument? Is might best? No. Consider the possibility that the other person, although they're weaker than you, are actually in the right. And the mature thing is therefore to step back and perhaps let the other person have their way, even if you're quite sure you're in the right, because maybe you're not in the right. So this hexagram number 6, it does transform. It changes. It changes to hexagram number 59, which is dispersion. So in terms of the conflict, just don't worry about it. Just let it just go. I mean, dispersion is like, the rain just blasts everything away. So just forget it. It's just not worth the effort, whatever this conflict is. I'm pretty sure it's not worth the effort, because I may be wrong. It's just the I Ching, and it's just talking about today. But just, metaphorically, let the rains just blast through it all and just move on to something else. And the thing I want to move on to now is the astrology of pets. I the astrology of pets. Well, you know, it's just not something I would have imagined I would be interested in, at least before I had dogs. But apparently people are interested in it. When I was talking to an editor at a big publishing house perhaps in my glory days in the 90s, it's been solid decline since then. He made a couple of points. He said that, when you're writing books, you should kind of focus on, you should imagine that you're writing for a 10-year-old. It's that kind of thing that you should be focusing on. Of course, I know people don't read books anymore, particularly 10-year-olds, but, that was the 90s. He also gave an example of a good book, a book that, he held up as being an example of a book that has done well, but what other people, potential writers, should be trying to aspire to. And this book was, I think, something like How to Measure the IQ of Your Dog. So dogs, yeah, they matter. So the big problem, of course, with doing the horoscope for your dog is, of course, the fact that you've got a litter with perhaps eight animals and going to different homes, and so they can't all have the same lives. Maybe it's a bit like twins, triplets. I mean, humans have twins, triplets. They can have exactly the same charts and go in very different directions. They don't even have to be related. You have time twins, people born at the same time, but again having completely different destinies. So what I want to do is I want to start with my first dog. I want to look at the horoscope of my first dog. And I really apologize for being so personal. It's just so indulgent just talking about my dog. Maybe you couldn't care less about my dog, but I'm just using this as an illustration to show that it might be worthwhile looking at dogs' horoscopes. Here is the chart of my first dog, Chuvi. Chuvi, the reason it's pronounced, it's spelt C-U-V-I. The reason it's pronounced Chuvi is that there is supposed to be a accent on a C, a hatchek, a sort of V thing. It's a Slovak accent, and so that transforms it, so it's no longer pronounced Kuvi, it's pronounced Chuvi when you put the hatchek on. So you can see that she was born on December the 13th, 2008. I have no idea what time she was born, so this is a midday chart, and she was born close to this town in Slovakia, Liptovsky Mikuláš, which I think is kind of central north Slovakia, close to the Polish border. And so, yeah, this is her chart. So a couple of points to make about this chart. It is a difficult chart. You can see that she had, I'm afraid she died last year, she had Saturn in Virgo square a Sun-Mars conjunction in Sagittarius, and this is opposition Uranus. So this dog had a T-square. So how would this T-square have manifested? Now, remember, the whole litter would have had this. And I do not believe that every single one of the litter experiences this. It may well be in some weird, messed up way that the reason it's working is because I'm into astrology. Now, I know that sounds far-fetched, but sometimes the observer can change what they're observing. And, so we shouldn't disregard that possibility out of hand. And also, when we're doing a chart, maybe we just need to think, well, we're thinking about this one dog. We're not worried about the rest of the litter. Sun square Saturn, there are limitations in her life. There are issues with her life. As a dog, she had all sorts of hang-ups. She was the runt of the litter. She had issues about food. When she was, in the shower being washed, she looked really sort of pathetic. And, I think that Sun Saturn square really did affect her. When we first got her, she seemed to be in a state of complete depression. Maybe all dogs are in a state of depression when you first get them. But it just looked as if the whole thing was a disaster. She really did show that Sun square Saturn. Now, as far as the moon, we have no idea what sign her moon is in. Moon was at 2 Cancer, but could have been in Gemini. Now, when you're looking at a dog's chart, what you probably need to do is not look at the chart in isolation. You actually need to compare that chart with the owner, and because it's the owner and the dog, that's what really that's the chemistry that matters, and that's what creates helps create the dog's personality and its destiny. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to compare this chart with my chart. Now, I'm not the only owner. There's my wife, and there's my son. So there are other people involved with this dog, but I'm just going to look at it from my perspective. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a bi-wheel involving my chart. I'm going to put my chart in the middle, and I am going to put Chuga's chart on the outside. So there we have it. I'm not talking about my chart. My chart is irrelevant. So a couple of points about this. When I got this dog, you can see that I've got this massive 6th house. So Saturn, transiting Saturn, okay, I hadn't bought the dog when she was born, but very soon after she was born, we took delivery. So I had transiting Saturn in my 6th house when I got this dog. Now, in astrology, the 6th house represents animals. It's roughly animals up to the size of a goat is the 6th house. That's a traditional rule. So dogs are the 6th house. Now, if you buy a dolphin or a horse or a whale, that's 12th house. Don't ask me the logic for that. But so if you've got a horse, you wouldn't look at the 6th house, you'd look at the 12th house. So I suddenly had to deal with 6th house issues. In other words, I had to deal with a dog. So that's perfect symbolism for that. That's the first point. Second point, in terms of the synastry between myself and my dog, you can see there's my Mercury at 1953 Gemini. And the dog's Mars was at 1942 Sagittarius, had a Sun-Mars conjunction in Sagittarius, opposition my Mercury. So how do you think that might have manifested? Well, yesterday I talked about medical astrology, and in fact it's a medical issue. Mercury rules the lungs, and I have mild asthma. So the moment I got this dog, within, I don't know, we brought the dog home in the car, and the moment we set off, within 10 minutes of being in the car with this dog, I could feel my lungs tighten. And I was completely allergic to the dog. These dogs, as you can see, it's a big furry thing. I mean, totally allergenic dog. So made a serious mistake there. And I was taking steroid inhalers, for I think a year and a half. You know, I certainly couldn't sleep in the same room as her. It was just a nightmare. But it took a year and a half for my lungs to acclimatize to her, or something like that. And I think that fits very well. There's Sun Mars in Sagittarius hitting my lungs. So that I think really fits. Now, as far as you know, you can see other things. I got, there's my south node. I have Saturn on the south node, and the north node was conjunct my south node. I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it. But yeah, so there was some interesting contacts there, and I think that the asthma was really important. But in terms of establishing that the chart works, I mean that's a big thing. Establishing that the chart works. How do we establish that it really does work? I haven't got the charts here, but she has had a couple of operations. Actually, did have a couple of operations for breast cancer. I think certainly one of those operations was there were certainly powerful transits there. It wasn't breast cancer that killed her, by the way. But as far as her death is concerned, I think I'm afraid her death chart really shows that astrology works. So let me show you. Let me show you. Contrast the birth chart with the death chart. Let's show you what I mean. So if that's a death chart, and right. So as I said, the big problem she has got is this T-square. Remember, she's got Saturn opposition Uranus with the Sun and Mars on the T, with that Saturn-Mars square. So what I want to do is I want to just compare her birth chart with the death chart. So let's so she died last year on August the 13th, I think at around 1 o'clock. So I'm going to put her chart in the middle, and there's her. So you will see that when she died, there's Saturn. Saturn in Aquarius was opposition the Sun. Can you see that there's actually 2158 Aquarius, 213. So there was a very close Sun-Saturn opposition in opposition when she died, and this opposition had Uranus on the T and Mars widely on the T. So there was actually a Mars-Saturn square when she died. So going back to her horoscope, her natal chart, she was born with an exact Sun-Saturn square. So she was very sensitive to the Sun-Saturn cycle. And so she was born on a Sun-Saturn square, and she died as you can see, on a Sun-Saturn opposition. And the appropriateness of the death, that sort of the ease of the death, it was, you can see she died when Sun was transiting Sun was trine her Sun, Saturn was sextile her Sun. So that Sun-Saturn opposition that she died on, which was, so she died also with Sun square Mars, and so the configuration repeated, even though it only transited by sextile and trine. So I think that repeated signature, that she was born on a Sun-Saturn square, died on a Sun square opposition, suggests to me that her horoscope was actually working. And maybe the fact that it was also Sun trine Sun, that was the end, and she died at 13, and she was around 13 and a half, which is not a bad age for a dog to die at. So in terms of one's practice, yes, I think one can not just do horoscopes for dogs, but I think one can actually benefit from this, because I think it's perhaps telling you how a dog's life might unfold. Now, as far as the dog who's got the birthday today or yesterday, this I mean, very quickly, here's her horoscope. She was born on August the 5th, 2022. So the two dogs had an overlap of about a week when they were both alive. So this is a very different dog. I had heard about this dog's chart before we'd agreed to buy it, and my first inclination when I heard that she is a Leo with Moon in Scorpio, I was thinking, no, don't think it's a good idea to buy a dog who's a Leo with Moon in Scorpio. That is just too stubborn for me. That really is stubborn. Interestingly, August the 5th is, what's her name? Meghan Markle. She was born on August the 4th. Anyway, our dog, August the 5th, she is a real stubborn bitch. And that's not surprising, because she has got the sun in a fixed sign, Moon in Scorpio, and look at, she's got a Mars-Uranus conjunction, and Saturn is square Mars. This Saturn square Mars, because she was born roughly the same time as the previous dog died. So, this is the Mars-Saturn square that her dog died under, the first dog died under, and this is what the dog with Saturn square she was born under. So there's a kind of a connection there. But all this stuff in fixed signs makes the dog incredibly stubborn, and indeed she is a complete nightmare. She is really stubborn, and if I'd looked at that chart more closely, we probably shouldn't have got the dog, but we've had her, and had her for some time. She's a year old, and that's the way it goes. We're stuck with her, and that's the thing about fixed signs. There's no concept of change. Very difficult to change an animal. She doesn't seem to learn. She doesn't seem to listen. So this is a real problem. So if you are getting a dog, really, do look at the dog's horoscope. Now, I understand that very often people get rescues. So you might think, well, what can you do? How can you? Maybe you just don't know what day a dog is born. Well, if you're thinking about getting a rescue, then you need to be a bit more creative. What it might be a question of doing is selecting the time you take ownership of the dog, choosing the right time to take ownership. So it would be like saying, well, I don't know, haven't got her birth chart, but what I can do is I can select a time to pick up that dog when everything is aligned as well as it can possibly be. So that is one approach. But if you do have the birth chart of the dog, as I've tried to demonstrate by looking at the birth chart and the death chart, it kind of gives you an idea, perhaps, of how the dog's life is going to unfold and where the particular crisis moments might be. Now, if you can get the time a dog is born, even better. But I'm afraid with these two charts that I've shown you, that's something I haven't got. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about the subject of pets. I used to think it was ridiculous to do the charts of pets. Completely trivial, ridiculous. I wasn't a dog person, but having been a dog owner since 2009, I have to reluctantly take the view that it is something you should be looking at if you have the opportunity. And as I said, even if it's a rescue, you can still have a chart for the time you pick the dog up. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. By the way, this is just to remind you, this is our 1-year-old dog, bouncy, but totally stubborn, and that's something we've got to deal with. And when you've got a lot of fixed signs and you've got a dog, you might want to consider that might be indicative of chronic illness and chronic conditions. Our dog, she has skin conditions which she's had for ages and ages, and we're trying to work it out. When I looked at Celine Dion's horoscope yesterday, I was trying to pinpoint the stiff person syndrome in her chart, and I was saying, well, her Sun-Saturn conjunction in Aries would seem to fit that. In a dog, you've got a similar issue. Of course, with this dog, I don't have a time of birth. It would have been a lot easier if I did have a time of birth. Maybe I should look for the time of birth. So maybe I should be trying to look at my dog's horoscope to try to work out the cause of this skin condition, because if you can really see it marked in a chart, then you might have a better chance of trying to fix it. But the fixity in her chart, you've got all this fixed stuff. It's Taurus, Leo, Aquarius, Moon in Scorpio. Something is really stuck there, and somewhere in that chart there may be just the hint about what the real problem is, and maybe that will help us sort it out. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about pets. If you do have a pet, then I would urge you to set up the pet's chart, or if you don't know when it's born, try and go back and find out when you pick the dog up and see if it fits. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today, and I will talk to you tomorrow.